Start this exercise by getting in a plank position. Push the ground away and then push up and back with your hips going towards your feet. If your hamstrings feel tight with this exercise, feel free to bend your knees even more. The goal of this exercise is to drop the chest as close to the ground as possible while extending your arms as far as they can overhead. If you feel ready to progress this exercise, you can do this with a single arm. So take one hand, reach it back towards the opposite toes, and then repeat the same thing with the other. If you feel like you need a regression, you can get in a plank position and do a scapular push-up, keeping the elbows straight, dropping the chest down towards the ground, and pushing the ground away. You can also do a alternating shoulder tap here. I'm trying to hold my tap for at least 2 seconds before bringing my other arm down. With the foam roll, I want to roll out as high as my arms will go above my head, pushing into the foam roller into the ground. I want to bring my chest down as low to the ground as possible. To progress this exercise, you can do an end range lift off at the end. So everything else is going to be the same, but once you get to the end, you're going to lift up as high as you can. Taking your right hand, I'm going to weave that through my left arm and reach and rotate. If you want to also add a rotation at the top, you can do that. But let the foam roll guide you, reach as far as you can, and let that right shoulder drop down towards the ground. Switching sides so you can see a different angle. I'm going to take my left hand, it's going to go through my right arm, and then I'm going to rotate upwards through my thoracic spine. For this exercise, start in a push-up position. You're going to rotate the top hand up towards the ceiling and then switch hands. Try not to let your hips drop when you rotate upwards. Keep everything in a nice straight line. Start this exercise lying on your stomach with your thumbs pointed up towards the ceiling. Squeeze your shoulder blades together, lifting as high as you can. We're going to do 8 to 10 in each position. Then you're going to go to a 90-degree bend. Try to keep your wrists in line with your elbows. Try not to have your elbows higher than your wrists. And then the last one, we're going to reach overhead into a Y position. Feel free to progress with small weights. If that last progression is too hard to start from the ground, you can always start from an elevated surface and go up as high as you're able to for each of these T, bent T, and Y positions. Start with the band around the wrist, pulsing outwards, and come up overhead. A common compensation is to stick the ribs out and arch from the low back. Make sure your core is engaged and your ribs are down as those arms are raising up overhead. You should feel a burn in the back of your shoulders. The dumbbell pullover is used to also increase range of motion in that overhead motion as well as strengthening that overhead motion. You want to make sure your back is nice and flat on that bench. Again, that ribs are not sticking out and flaring. Keep that core engaged. If you want to progress this exercise, you can also lift your feet up in the air, keeping that back flat still and performing the exercise. To perform cat-cow, start in a quadruped position, then round your back up towards the ceiling, and then drop and arch your back down towards the floor. We want to go back and forth through these motions. If anything feels uncomfortable, just stay in that range of motion that you can tolerate. If you want to bias your low back, move your hips down towards your heels, and you should get most of your movement in that low spine. If you want to bias your thoracic spine or your upper spine, walk your hands out forward, and most of your movement should come from that upper back. As we move into child's pose, try to keep your tailbone tucked as you reach your arms forward overhead. You should feel a stretch in your low back. If you want to specifically stretch one side, reach towards the opposite side. So as I reach to my left, I'm stretching my right side low back. And if I want to stretch my left side of my low back, I'm going to reach towards the right. Start in a quadruped position for the bird dog and try to keep your shoulders and hips square as your opposite arm and opposite leg reach out in front of you towards the walls. Try not to arch your back as you reach up. Keep everything nice and neutral. For the open book, start in a side lying position, bend your top knee, and keep your bottom leg straight. You can also use your hand to hold down your top knee so that it stays on the ground and you can get a little bit more rotation throughout the spine. Here's a view facing the other way just so you can see what that looks like. If it feels good, feel free to hold that stretch, but if you want to make it more dynamic, then you can go ahead and close the book and open the book. To work your hips, set up in a side plank position. Your shoulders, hips, and knees and foot should all be in a line. Raise the top leg and hold it there for the desired amount of time. To progress, you can either increase time, add weight to the top of the knee, or also add a band around the knees. Perform on both sides. Start laying on your stomach and squeeze your glutes as you lift up your arms and legs. I like to hold for 5 seconds and then come back down. This will strengthen the low back muscles and also contribute to core strength. If you have any discomfort with this, decrease the amount that you are coming off the ground. Here I'm rocking my hips back and forth to find where my back can be flat on the ground. Once I find this position, I want to keep my back flat before raising up into a bridge position. This will allow me to not overarch and extend from my low back and keep the muscles of the glute and hamstrings engaged the whole time. To progress, do this with one leg, and you can also add some weight onto your hips, and you can also elevate your shoulders onto a bench to perform a single leg bridge as well.